you for having me here, and I especially want to thank the Philosophy Grad Students Association, the Philosophy Grad Students Association Conference Committee, the University of Waterloo Philosophy Department, and the University of Waterloo Minorities and Philosophy Chapter, the MAP chapter. Thank you all very much for bringing me out. I've really enjoyed this conference, and I've enjoyed hearing what everyone's working on, and this is great. Happy to be here. Okay, so the topic of this talk is the trolley problem. And you might already be familiar with what the problem is, but we're going to just start off and make sure we're clear on the version of the problem that I'm working with. So I'm going to work with these two cases. And if you, I guess I can draw a picture. So, okay. Okay, so, You're lucky that those look like people. Sometimes when I draw a stick figure, it looks really weird. Okay, so a trolley's brakes have failed, and it is careening towards 5 individuals who are stranded on the tracks up ahead. You happen to be standing on a footbridge. This is the footbridge. Over the tracks next to a very large man. So this is you, and this is the large man. If you shove the large man off the footbridge and onto the tracks below, he will die, but his body will stop the trolley before it reaches the 5. That's the first version, so ignore what I just put here. So the first case is you're on this footbridge. You could push a guy into the way of the trolley, and he would die, and then these 5 would live. That's the large man case. And then we can contrast that with another case. It's called bystander. So in bystander, a trolley's brakes have failed, and it's careening towards 5 individuals who are stranded on the tracks up ahead, and you happen to be, now you're standing here. This footbridge isn't here in the second version of the case. You're standing here next to a lever, and if you pull that lever, it's going to turn the trolley onto this side track away from the stranded 5. Unfortunately, there is one person stranded on the side track, and if you pull the lever, the trolley will kill the one. So here are some things we can say. A lot of people think in the large man case, it's wrong to push the guy off the footbridge and use his body to stop the trolley and kill him. It's wrong to do that. How many of you had that intuition when I described the large man case to you? Okay. And then a lot of people also have the intuition that it is not wrong to turn the trolley in the bystander case. You can just redirect it. This person will die, these 5 will live. So how many of you had that intuition, that it's not wrong to turn the trolley in the bystander case? Okay. I mean, that's taken to be the common sense view. So 1 and 2 are taken to be the, these are all supposed to be common sense. The third claim is that large man and bystander are morally on a par. So it seems like that there's no real relevant difference between the two cases. So a lot of people think these are both cases of killing 1 to save 5. And we can stipulate, if you're concerned, that the harm of death will be equivalent to each of the 6 individuals whose lives are at stake. We can just stipulate that. They're equally valuable to society if that's a concern for you. So those aren't going to constitute differences between the cases. And it's not clear what else could constitute a difference between the cases. So if there's no difference that could explain this difference in judgments, it seems like, well, we should actually judge that it's either wrong in both cases or it's okay in both cases. So why do we have this conflicting judgment that it's wrong in large man to kill the 1 to save the 5, but it's not wrong in bystander to kill the 1 to save the 5. So that's the problem. So what you see on the screen here is not an argument. It's an inconsistent triad. So it's a set of 3 claims that can't all be true together, right? So that's the way to capture the problem. And the problem, also, all 3 of these claims seem like they're common sense. So that's what makes this a hard problem, is that we're inclined to really believe 1, and we're inclined to believe 2, and we're inclined to believe 3. we've got good reasons for accepting all three. But logically, we can't accept all three. So we have to figure out which one of these three claims to reject. And if we can figure that out, and we can make a good argument for rejecting one of the three claims, then we can claim to have solved the trolley problem. OK, so if you are a utilitarian, you might be inclined to solve the problem by rejecting the first claim. So you just might think, well, there are some psychological biases that might explain why we feel weird about pushing a guy to his death, but we shouldn't trust those. There's something not trustworthy about them. They actually don't justify the intuition that it's, they don't justify the judgment that it's wrong to kill this guy. So really, we should just be consistent, and we should always kill one to save five, at least if we're in cases relevantly similar to these two cases. On the other hand, Judith Thompson, who is basically one of the people who came up with the trolley problem, the problem developed from the writing of Judith Thompson and Philippa Foot. Originally, she had the judgment in the 80s when she wrote about this. She had the judgment that it is not wrong to turn the trolley, but recently in 2008, she changed her view. And so now she has a new paper where she argues that actually you shouldn't turn the trolley to the one. So you shouldn't do either thing. You shouldn't kill the large man on the footbridge, and you shouldn't turn the trolley. So that's how she now solves the problem. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to reject this claim, and I'm going to tell you that there's a morally relevant difference between large man and bystander. So that's the main thing I'm going to do in this talk, is try to explain what that morally relevant difference is between the two cases. OK, so I'm going to appeal to a view that I call the aggregating reasons view. And according to this view, we don't aggregate gains and losses to individuals in the way that a utilitarian does. So you don't say, like, 5 deaths are 5 times worse than 1 death, because like a death is a loss, right? And you're just adding up losses, and you try to maximize utility. I don't think we should do that, but I do think that we can aggregate. It's just, I think we can aggregate in a way that's not utilitarian. It's a deontological way of aggregating. You aggregate reasons. And I think each reason is grounded in a different person. And so in most cases, I apply this view not just to the trolley problem, but to all kinds of problems. But I think it also solves the trolley problem. In many cases, this view is going to get the same results as a utilitarian view. But there are going to be a few cases where my view will diverge from utilitarianism. And this is one of them. OK, and here's the reason why. Here's the reason why this isn't the same as utilitarianism. Because reasons, the things that we're aggregating, they come in different types, and they have strengths that can reflect deontological concerns, like the distinction between doing and allowing harm. OK, all right. So there is a long tradition for deontologists to like this doctrine of doing and allowing harm, but a lot of the literature on the doctrine of doing and allowing harm takes the distinction between doing harm to somebody and allowing harm to somebody to be a two-part distinction. There's doing harm, there's allowing harm. But what I think we should really say is that there's a 4-part distinction. There's 4 things. There's 4 ways of being connected to a harm that befalls somebody. So let me go over the 4 ways, first with an intuitive set of cases that kind of give you an intuitive idea of what these things are. And then I also have a more precise metaphysical account of the differences. But we'll start with just examples. We're going to start with examples, and then you'll get the account later. So here's an example of doing by action. Jones pushes a boulder. It rolls down the mountain and crushes Smith, who was hiking in the valley below. You take an action, you push the boulder, and you did harm to Smith. He's dead. The harm was death. OK, doing by omission, this is a little bit weirder. 5 minutes ago, Jones pushed a boulder. Because it hasn't yet picked up speed, so the boulder was actually on a gentle slope in this case, Jones still has time to drag a log into the boulder's path. And this would stop the boulder before it rolls any further. And it would stop it before it rolls like toward a steeper part of the slope and then goes down and crushes Smith. But He chooses not to do so. He chooses not to stop what he started. The boulder rolls the rest of the way down the mountain and crushes Smith. So I think there's actually two relevant times that come up in this case. There's time T1, where he pushes the boulder. That's still doing by action. But there's another thing he does at time T2, where he has a chance to push the log in front of the boulder, and that's when he doesn't do anything, although he could do something. And because he omits to push the log at time T2, that is the time at which he makes it true that he kills Smith by action. He makes it true that his past action was efficacious. And so I think it's a case of doing what he does when he fails to stop what he started, but it's a case of doing by omission, because at time T2, he's not doing anything, or he's not acting then. He's still doing then, but he's not acting at time T2. Okay, so that's doing by omission. Now there's allowing by action. So a boulder is rolling down a mountain, but there's a log directly in its path, and the log is large enough to stop the boulder's roll. Jones walks over to the log and drags it out of the way. The boulder rolls the rest of the way down the mountain, where it crushes Smith. So in this particular case, Jones didn't push the boulder to start with. It was already rolling on its own. He had nothing to do with that. But it was going to stop when it hit the log, and he goes out and moves the log out of the way. And so now I think he's taking an action. He's pulling the log out of the way, but he's not doing the harm to Smith. He's allowing the harm by acting in a certain way. He's allowing the harm to befall Smith. Finally, there's allowing by omission. So a boulder is rolling down the mountain. Jones can drag a log into its path to stop it, but he chooses not to do so. The boulder rolls the rest of the way down the mountain and crushes Smith. So in this particular case, there is no log in the path of the boulder. It's got a clear path. It's just rolling down the hill. There's nothing there. He could push a log into its path, but he chooses not to do so. So I think this is a case of allowing by omission. Okay, so that's how these four distinctions work. So we've got doing by action, doing by omission, allowing by action, and allowing by omission. Now, in the case of Jones that I described, I want to be clear that all four of these things are wrong. Obviously, Jones was a bad actor in all four cases. Like, obviously, that death is a harm to Smith, and Jones should have done what he could to prevent it or to not cause it. Absolutely. But I nevertheless think that there still are tiny differences in the degree of wrongdoing in each of the four cases. And so the way I'm going to express this is by saying that there is a type 1 reason against doing by action. There's a type 2 reason against doing harm by omission. These are all cases of doing harm. Type 1 reason against doing harm by action, a type 2 case of doing harm by omission, a type 3 reason against allowing harm by action, and a type 4 reason against allowing harm by omission. Other things being equal, if the only difference between two cases, like if the harm is the same, like the intentions are the same, whatever else, if the only difference is the type of reason, like it's a type 1 versus a type 2, I think that it's worse to act against your type 1 reason, for example, than the type 2. And it's worse to act against type 2 than type 3, and it's worse to act against type 3 than type 4. What time do I stop?
Quarter after is kind of what we scheduled for, but as long as you want to keep speaking.
Okay, because now we face a choice. I can get into it, or I could just keep. I have like a rabbit hole that we can go down for a little while, and then we can resurface with the general problem. Are you ready to go down the rabbit hole?
Let's do it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let me tell you what's happening. So my real argument for the aggregating reasons view is that I think it's the best explanation of our intuitions about the trolley problem. So it's an argument to the best explanation. I think it solves the trolley problem. That's why I could skip this particular rabbit hole I'm about to go down, because in the end of this talk, I'm going to show you how my view solves the trolley problem, and we'll be all done. But what this rabbit hole is that we're about to go down is a supplementary argument. It's an extra argument for the claim I've just made, that type 1 reasons are stronger than type 2 are stronger than type 3, and type 3 are stronger than type 4. And I'm going to argue that this principle about the type of reasons is going to explain a lot of other cases besides just the trolley case. So I'm going to give you like extra reasons to accept my view. But you don't have to like pay attention right now if you're like tired. You can zone out for about 10 minutes and then tune back in when we get back to the trolley problem. But let me just give you some more extra reasons for thinking that this ordering of reasons is morally relevant. So first, let's compare a type 1 reason to a type 2 reason, and I want to hold everything equal. So the only difference between the two cases we're going to talk about is, oh no, it's one case, but here you'll see what's happening. So here's the case. I'm going to read it to you. At 10 a.m., Jones put some deadly poison into Smith's teapot and then drove away in his tank, knowing that Smith would drink the tea at 11 a.m. At 10:58 a.m., Jones has a change of heart. He wants to warn Smith not to drink the tea. Unfortunately, there is now an innocent person named Bloggs, trapped in the road to Smith's house. The only way Jones can get back in time to prevent Smith's death is by running over Bloggs and thereby killing him. Okay, so in this particular case, I don't know, how many of you guys think he shouldn't run over Bloggs in his tank? Good, that's the intuition I have too. Okay, right, so Jones must not drive over Bloggs to save Smith. And then I think that a good explanation for this judgment is that other things being equal, a type 1 reason is stronger than a type 2 reason. I guess this isn't a case pair. This is a different way of arguing for difference in strength of reasons. My bad. Okay. Right, because Jones has a type 1 reason against driving over Bloggs with his tank, and he has a type 2 reason against allowing Smith to drink the poisoned tea. That would be, allowing Smith to drink the poisoned tea would be doing by omission, be making it true that he poisoned Smith by not doing anything to stop the thing he started. Okay. Now let's look at why 2 is stronger than 3. A few days ago, Jones poisoned Phil, a world-renowned percussionist, and Phil is now dying. Jones feels terrible about what he did, and so to prevent Phil from dying, Jones would like to attach himself to Phil's body with a special tube that would allow Jones's kidneys to filter the poisons out of Phil's blood. Unfortunately, Jones is already attached to a world-renowned violinist named Vlad. Vlad had fallen ill from an unrelated cause, and the Society for Music Lovers had kidnapped Jones and attached him to Vlad in order to save Vlad's life. If Jones disconnects himself from Vlad in order to attach to Phil, Phil will live and Vlad will die. Okay, so obviously, if you're wondering why people are laughing, it's because this is a really weird use of the case that Judith Thompson formulates in her article about abortion. Her case is not this complicated, but I used her example of the violinist and the Society for Music Lovers because it's funny. Okay. Okay, so I think Vlad is the violinist. I think Jones should not unplug himself from Vlad in order to plug himself into Phil. This one is a harder one to have an intuition about. I recognize that. Do you guys agree that so you're already plugged into this dude. You need to stay plugged into him to save his life. And then it turns out that there's this other guy. You could just like abandon that project, let this dude die now, and plug yourself into the person that you killed, or that you would be killing. Wait a minute. Oh, why did I say not? Oh my God, I just messed up my whole talk. I'm going to go home. Sorry. No, I was like, wait a minute, I don't have that intuition that I'm trying to tell people to have. Oh my God, I have the opposite. No, I have the opposite intuition. It's right there on the slide. You should do it, because you would kill the guy. Sorry, gosh. But this is a hard case, so I got confused about my own case. But do you guys agree that you should save the guy that you almost murdered?
Save Phil.
Right. So only 2 people want us to save Phil over Vlad?
It's only
Wait, who's Phil? Are you? Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Definitely, we should save Phil. Okay. So this one might be weird. This might not be like an argument for my view so much as like an implication of my view. Maybe the whole argument is just that the whole thing is going to cohere together well, even if this part doesn't seem immediately obvious. That's fine. Okay. Let me give you another one for why 3 is stronger than 4. Pat, the percussionist, fell ill from causes unrelated to Jones. So did Vlad, the violinist. Jones is currently attached to Vlad and must remain attached for a week in order to save Vlad's life. If he disconnects in order to connect to Pat, Vlad will die and Pat will live, otherwise Pat will die. This is the one I was talking about before. So this is the one where I think you shouldn't, once you're plugged in, just stay plugged in if everything else is equal. Like why would you, you're almost done here. You're on the home stretch. You're gonna save this guy and then you're like, oh no, I'd rather save this other guy. And they're both like randos. So why would you do that? Okay. So how many of you think that you should, okay, let's get the intuition right. You should not disconnect from Vlad to save Pat. You're already plugged into Vlad. I mean, just, finish what you started. Okay. So I think that the explanation for this intuition is that other things being equal, a type 3 reason is stronger than type 4. Okay, so now I've given you maybe a little bit more ammunition for thinking that the ordering of reasons is what I say it is. 1 is stronger than 2, 2 is stronger than 3, 3 is stronger than 4. But again, the main argument is that this also solves the trolley problem. Okay. But before we get to the trolley problem, I've got another complication in the view. So the next complication is, what do we do when there's more than one person that you're weighing against one other person? What do you do when the numbers get bigger? Number of potential victims. Well, let's take a look. Okay, so at 10 a.m., Jones put some deadly poison into a teapot and then drove away knowing that 5 people, not just 1, 5, would drink the tea at 11 a.m. At 10:58, Jones has a change of heart. Unfortunately, Bloggs is now trapped in the road, and the only way Jones can get back in time to prevent the death of the 5 is by running over and killing Bloggs. Now, in the case of poisoned tea for 1, in the case where Jones would have to run over just one guy with his tank, I had the intuition, and a lot of you agreed with me, that that would be wrong. But now that the numbers have changed, I'm going to give you a really weird judgment, which doesn't seem very deontological of me, but I'm not a normal deontologist. I have these weird utilitarian sympathies. Okay, so in this case, I really actually think you should drive over Bloggs to save the 5. How many of you agree with me? Now that the numbers, when it was just one person that was dying from the poisoned tea, I didn't think you should kill somebody else. But now, there's 5 people you will have killed by poisoning them if you don't kill Bloggs. So it's almost a choice between killing 5 and killing 1. And if you have a choice between killing 5 and killing 1, you should probably kill 1. Killing is bad. Don't do it. Don't do this at home. But it's almost that way. Although you'll be killing the 5 by omission, and you'll be killing Bloggs by action. But I still think in this case the 5 kind of offsets the 1. So raise your hand if you agree with me. You agree?
I actually have a question.
Oh, sure.
So you said the judgment when you were speaking, Jones should drive over Bloggs to save the 5, but up there you've got Jones may drive.
Ooh.
Permissibility, and I just was wondering.
Oh yeah. Okay, my should was imprecise. I think he may do it. Thank you. That's very good. And I also think in the trolley case, I don't remember if I formulated this right. I should have been more careful. I think you may turn the trolley down the sidetrack. not that you should. Okay, so how many agree that he may drive over blogs? Yes. Okay. Good. Okay. I mean, not may in the probabilistic sense, but may in the ethical sense. All right. Here's another case where the numbers have changed. A few days ago, this picture's stupid. Okay, a few days ago, Jones poisoned Phil. Jones now feels terrible, and he would like to attach himself to Phil and thereby save Phil's life. Unfortunately, Jones is already attached to 5 violinists whom he didn't poison. Jones cannot disconnect from just one. If he disconnects at all, he must disconnect from all 5. But if he disconnects himself from the 5, Phil will live and the 5 will die. And now, in the case where he was already connected to just one violinist, I said he should disconnect from that one violinist to save Phil, the percussionist, because Phil was the one he poisoned, and the one he was connected to was not the person that he poisoned. But in this particular case, even though he poisoned Phil again, now he's not just connected to one rando, he's connected to 5 randos. And it's true, he didn't poison them, but it's 5 people who are now depending on him. And so now this intuition that he needs to kind of finish what he started, and like cure all those people before he messes around with other things, that intuition I feel like is stronger now. And so now my judgment has shifted. Like once the numbers got bigger, my judgment shifted. And so I think that Jones has more reason to stay attached to the 5 violinists. Raise your hand if you agree with me.
Sorry, Phil.
Okay, good. All right, and so then the explanation for this is that multiple type 3 reasons are stronger than one type 2 reason. So let me summarize all of the things I've just said. This was the rabbit hole. We're like nearing the end of the rabbit hole, okay? So this was like we're coming away with some principles. So the first principle is the strength by type principle, which says when it's just like 1 versus 1, for example, one person versus one person, type 1 reasons are stronger than type 2, which are stronger than type 3, which are stronger than type 4. Second principle, which I haven't talked about yet, but I think it's relevant in some cases, is that there's a stronger reason against doing or allowing harm to an individual the greater the harm. So that matters. It matters whether you're killing somebody or just giving them like a hangnail or like breaking their toe, right? That matters too, although I didn't even give you any cases to illustrate that because that's pretty obvious. So harm, strength, degree of harm matters. Then we've got principle 3, aggregating same strength reasons. So when the various reasons for or against an action are all of a similar strength, the agent ought to perform the action supported by the greatest number of reasons. So remember I said a long time ago that there's usually like 1 reason per person? So when there's 5 people, and they're all suffering the same degree of harm, like they're all going to die, then you have 5 reasons, like 5 death reasons, basically. 5 reasons. So 5 reasons versus 1 reason or something. So that matters. So this aggregating same strength reasons principle is basically just saying numbers of people matter. That's what it says. Numbers of people matter when you're holding constant the degree of harm to each individual. Like they're all going to die. It's not that like one person gets a broken elbow and then everyone else dies. If it's the same harm to all of them, numbers matter. Numbers of people matter. And then the 4th principle is that when different courses of action are supported by reasons of different strengths, the weaker reasons can sometimes outweigh the stronger ones if the weaker reasons are greater in number. This allows for a case which I haven't talked about and isn't important to my view, but I want to leave it open that maybe sometimes you can chop off somebody's leg, one person's leg, to prevent 5 people from each losing a hand, or something like that, where the harms are going to be different, maybe. So you're doing like different degrees of harm and different numbers. But that stuff is going to get way more complicated, and we don't need that for the trolley problem. So that's just a thing to like flag for future work. But really, we just need the first three reasons, the strength by type, strength by degree of, actually, no, we just need the strength by type and the aggregating same strength reasons to solve the trolley problem. So here we go. OK. In the large man case, what I want to say is that you have a type 1 reason against pushing the large man off the footbridge into the path of the trolley. That's doing by action. You take an action with your arms, you push the guy, and then you cause him to die. So that's a type 1 reason. You also have 5 type 4 reasons to save these people. Type 4, so that's like a big difference. Type 4, if you didn't save them, you would be allowing harm to them by omission. But because it's such a big difference between type 1 and type 4 is way down on the list in our ordering of reasons, even ratcheting the numbers up so that it's 5 people you could save still doesn't give you enough justification for killing the man on the footbridge. So you shouldn't push the man off the footbridge. However, I want to say that in bystander, people made a mistake when they assumed that turning the trolley was killing. More precisely, I think that turning the trolley is allowing by action. So it's actually a very different kind of thing than pushing a guy off a footbridge. And to support this, just first of all, I'm going to give you an account. I haven't given you the metaphysics of doing and allowing yet, but I did give you the example of Jones and the boulder. So remember Jones and the boulder, where Jones, the boulder was rolling down the hill towards Smith, and there was a log in the way of the boulder, and Jones grabbed the log and dragged it out of the path of the boulder, and then the boulder finished rolling down the hill and crushed Smith. So Jones took an action, but in that case, he didn't push the boulder to begin with. Right? He didn't have, the boulder was rolling on its own. It was just rolling down the hill. And he acted, but I want to say that he didn't do it. He didn't do by action. He allowed by action. He allowed the death to come to Smith. And now what I want to say is, notice that there's just some similarities between the bystander case where you turn the trolley and the pulling the log case where you pull the log out of the way. You've got this, in one case you had a boulder going down a hill, in another case you have like a trolley going down a track, and you just turn the lever and the trolley just goes the other way. And so when the trolley hits the one on the sidetrack, you're allowing harm to the one by action. And so you only have a type 3 reason to refrain from doing that to the one. Whereas you still have 5 type 4 reasons to refrain from doing that to the 4. And so because a type 3 reason is so close to a type 4 reason, they're closer in the hierarchy of reasons, numbers are going to make a difference here. So numbers didn't make a difference to like between the type 1 and the type 4 issue. But once you get down to a type 3 versus type 4 issue, numbers are enough to tip the scales. And so then it becomes OK to kill the one, or not kill, sorry, to bring about death by actively, to allow by action, thank you, allow by action the one. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, okay, really, Molly's solution to the trolley problem, she went through all this rigmarole, but really, like the point is just that doing is worse than allowing. When you push the guy, you're doing, and when you turn the trolley, you're allowing, problem solved. Like, isn't that just my view? Why do I have to have this 4-fold distinction? Why can't I just have a 2-part distinction, doing, allowing, and just say that when you turn the trolley, you're allowing, and then like call it a day, and we all go home? Like, why did I have to get so complicated? I'll tell you why. Because there's another version of the trolley case where we have just one person on the main track and one person on the side track, no footbridge. Trolley's heading down to kill this one person, and you're the bystander, and you're standing by this lever, and you could redirect the trolley down the side track to save the one. And in that case, maybe I should read the case. Sorry, I should always read slides if I show you text on slides so that you don't get distracted. Here it is. A trolley's brakes have failed, and it is careening towards one individual who is stranded on the tracks up ahead. You happen to be standing next to a lever that, if pulled, will turn the trolley onto a sidetrack away from the stranded one. Unfortunately, there's one other person stranded on the sidetrack, and if you pull the lever, the trolley will kill this person. So this case actually comes from an article by Fiona Woolard, and she points out that she thinks, and I agree with her, that it would be wrong to turn the trolley in this case. And so you can't really just say that, so if all I said was that turning the trolley is allowing, it's allowing in this case, and it's allowing in all cases, and the reason you can't push the guy is that it's doing, but if you turn the trolley, it's allowing. I can't just say that because it's a certain type of allowing that still is worse than other types of allowing, right? So it's worse to allow the guy on the sidetrack to get killed when I turn the trolley onto him. It's worse to do that kind of allowing than the other kind of allowing where I just stand there and let the trolley go down the main track and kill the one. So there are degrees in types of allowing. So that's why we need the 4-part distinction, not just a 2-part distinction. So in this case, whoops, what the hell? I don't know what that is. Oh, wait, no, it is. It's correct. I'm sorry. So in this case, one type 3 reason outweighs one type 4 reason. OK. Good. Here's a nice summary, and we've got scales. Large man, one type 1 reason outweighs 5 type 4 reasons. Bystander, one type 3 reason is outweighed by 5 type 4 reasons. Trolley 1, one type 3 reason outweighs one type 4 reason. And whoops, I didn't tell you about rescue. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about that. No way. Cool. OK, that I do have a whole bunch of extra slides where I tell you exactly what these distinctions amount to in metaphysics. So I give you full accounts of doing by allowing, doing by action, doing by omission, allowing by action, allowing by omission. But I do not have time for that. However, if you have questions about how it works metaphysically, you can ask in the Q&A. So all you have is the example of the boulder to give you an intuitive idea. OK, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gardner. I've been asked to remind everyone that we are recording today, so if you are sheepish for whatever reason about being on camera, perhaps don't ask a question. We've also been taking pictures of today without your permission. If you would like to be omitted from any pictures on the website or anything, just come let me know. My apologies for not doing that beforehand. But that said, I will get a speakers list going for anyone who has a question for Dr. Gardner. And Nick, can we start with you?
Oh, do you want to start with the grad student?
Are there any grad student? David, there you are. You go first.
For the reasoning, there are 4 types, right?
Yeah.
And you order them in a way, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yep.
And I was wondering, so some of it, my intuition was along with you, but
OK.
some of my intuition was off.
OK.
So maybe there's a pluralistic version of it?
Well,
yeah, that's what I'm
OK,
Is
good.
there a possibility for pluralism is there?
Yeah, I definitely don't expect everyone to have exactly the same intuitions that I have about all of the cases, because I'm not even sure my intuitions are that strong myself. But in some of the cases, my intuitions are more strong. And I feel like this picture that I've given you with all the different pieces to it, it explains the things where I'm most confident so well that I feel OK about accepting what the view would say in cases where I'm less confident, because I feel like it just works as a picture. I just have this kind of reflective equilibrium method that I'm doing. And I just feel like this web of beliefs hangs together really well in my mind. And so that's why I'm willing to go along with what the view tells me in cases like poisoned tea for 5 or something, if my intuitions were less clear in that case. So I would invite you to even if you don't agree with me, think about, well, what would an alternative view be? And would it have as many costs as my view? And if it's too costly, maybe you might want to adjust your judgment about some of the cases where you initially disagreed.
So thanks a lot for that. I'm wondering, so because I don't share some of the intuitions, I'm
Okay.
pretty hardcore Kantian when it comes to the bystander case.
Okay.
Even when you have the sort of multiple people being poisoned by the tea, I feel like it's not okay to drive over whatever the name of the person is on the road with your tank, the man I want to tank.
Okay.
So given that I've got those sorts of intuitions, yeah, so here it's, so given that I don't share the intuitions the same way, I'm a bit more Kantian, I think. I'm wondering if the weightings count, I take them, when you put them up there, to count as sort of substantive moral claims. You're kind of making claims about, and empirical claims about moral facts. And I took them to be pretty indicative of your intuitions, that they were capturing your intuitions in a way that I was starting to read them, because I didn't agree with them, as stipulative definitions about how you weigh things. So I'm wondering what prevents somebody from coming in and saying, no, I don't think in any case, any type 3 reason is outweighed by n type 4 reasons, whatever the number for n is. I'm a Kantian. And what I see in you putting up here is a bunch of stipulative definitions that capture your intuitions, but I don't read them as substantive claims.
Good. So I think that remember that I thought that the strongest argument for my view is that I think it solves the trolley problem really well. And then the stuff about the tank and the tea and all that stuff is kind of like a subsidiary discussion. So the best thing to object to, I guess, is to the big picture thing here. So as a Kantian, would you take the Judith Thompson route, and would you say that it's wrong to turn the trolley in bystander?
Yes.
Okay, that's the view you take.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, in fact, you could put any number of people on the other side of the tracks, because I'm dedicated to the idea that that there's no wrong action if there's no action, and letting them die is a passion.
Wow, okay, cool. Okay, good.
I'm playing the devil's advocate, I think.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Okay, so that's where we agree. And so then we would have to, I think we'd have to have a discussion about numbers of people. And it sounds like you're saying that the numbers just don't matter. Like,
I mean, I'll go check the groundwork again, but no.
Okay, I mean, so what if, here, and what I'm going to try to persuade you is the numbers at least sometimes matter. So I want you to get rid of your absolutist position. And then once you've gotten rid of your absolutist position, I feel like I can lure you in to my web of beliefs. But to get rid of your absolutist intuition that you can never, ever turn the trolley, what if instead of 5 people on this track, we had 1,000 or like 1 million? There's like 1 million people. And they are all ins in themselves. They are, this is a kingdom of ins over here. Like, they are, and then we've got this one person. Even in a case like that,
Well,
you wouldn't turn the trolley?
So here's the reason why, and here's the reason why I think Judith Jarvis Thompson changed her mind. Right?
Uh-huh.
None of those beings, none of the ends in themselves has a right not to die. Every single one has a right not to be killed unduly and for no reason, especially if they're innocent. That's what's driving the intuition here. And what's driving Judith Jarvis Thompson is you can just throw out her paper on abortion if you don't change your mind about bystander.
Well, I guess I'm more committed to like the view that you should, about what you should do than about what the concept of a right is or is not. And I just feel like in this case, what you should do is turn the trolley. This is 1 million people. This is like a bomb going off in a city. This is like a nuclear bomb. Like, this is awful to have this many people die. And you need, I mean, sometimes you just have to do stuff that you don't want to do, but you got to do it. this person might not like it, and Judith Thompson's argument is that you should put yourself in the position of this guy, and if you wouldn't want it done to you, I mean, I'm simplifying her argument, then you shouldn't do it to this guy. But I don't care. I don't care that this guy doesn't want to die. I care about, I mean, I do care, but I don't care enough because this number is so big.
All right, I don't think we're going to satisfy Nick.
Okay.
Continue on to
Nick is satisfied. Kantian Nick is satisfied.
the numinal Nick. Jan, you're the next.
Thank you so much. This is super interesting, super fun. I guess, I don't know how productive this question is going to be, but I'm sort of curious about like a kind of the conditions for success of a theory. So you're saying the best argument for my view is it solves this problem.
Yes.
And I agree that it solves this problem. And it does this other really cool thing that it accommodates a whole swath of intuitions that we have. But I'm wondering whether the purpose of doing moral theorizing isn't for me to decide what to do in these situations. And I think that deciding what to do involves like, you know, sort of thinking about what I'm doing in a deeper kind of way. And so here I think the story that's going on is we generate the intuitions that we have, right? The intuitions that we have. Oh, pull it, don't pull it. Run the guy over, don't run the guy over. Plug. And I guess what I would like from a moral theory is to not be based on, do I do it, do I not do it? But rather, you know, to figure out which ones of those do I throw away and which ones I don't.
Which ones of which?
Which ones of the intuition?
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I guess I'm just wondering whether, how you would respond to somebody who thinks, my intuitions are a mess. Like I need to, you know, go see a therapist, they're not in order, and they're not going to be coherent. I'm going to have to sort them out in some other way. So I guess, does that make sense as a kind of worry to have?
Yeah, like I don't think that philosophy or ethics in particular is that different from science. In ethics, I take the intuitions to be kind of like data points, and you're always trying to come up with some theory that explains the data. And you do experiments, but you don't do real experiments, you do thought experiments, and then you get your data, and then you try to accommodate it. In physics, we get really weird data points. Like at CERN, we're taking particles, and we're crashing them into other particles, and we're like, whoa, we thought we had tachyons, and it turns out we didn't find tachyons, and then we're like, oh, there's the Higgs boson, and these particles have this spin, and these particles have this spin. And all of our individual data points are really weird. And maybe like you'd say, like, well, these physicists need to go to a therapist and get themselves straightened out. But the thing is, like, that's just how reality is. And so rather than be like, I don't trust any of my intuitions because they're all too weird and there's too many of them and it's too complicated, instead you just have to do the thing and you find the theory. And the theory might be more complicated than you thought it would be, or than you wish it would be. You might wish that Newton's theory of physics were true, but it's not. Instead, like, quantum electrodynamics seems to be a better theory than Newtonian mechanics or whatever. So it's, the truth might just be complicated. But we can still do it, and we have come up with quantum electrodynamics. Is that what it is, QED? We have come up with that theory, and it does explain a lot of these weird data points, and so we take that to be progress. And so I'm not saying that my theory is quantum electrodynamics, but I'm saying I don't want people to object to it on the grounds that it's too complicated. That's not what you were saying, so I might have misconstrued you. It doesn't matter that it's too complicated, because the data is complicated. And so sometimes to explain a complicated data set, you have to have a complicated theory. But that wasn't quite what you were saying. Maybe, I'm sorry, I went off on a tangent and answered a different question. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay. I can come back, though, because I feel like there might not be a lot of questions, and then I can come back and
Okay, we'll see how
I have something else to say that's completely different. Okay.
I'm hopeful, and maybe given the mysterious metaphysics that you reference that you have in the background, is I've always had this intuition that part of why I think omission is okay is because there's this, or even pulling the lever is more okay, is because I think there's this gap of time where something else could happen. So my mind inserts, but if I pull this, I could shout at the same time and they could leave. Then I'm actually inserting another possibility. whereas I know the thought experiment doesn't allow for that. But that's, I think, part of my intuition of what makes it more okay, because I've made another possible outcome, but maybe that they won't die.
Huh. So it might be that facts about the badness of doing and facts about action and omission and stuff, they might not be brute moral facts. There might be a deeper explanation for why the principles have the ordering that they do. And it might be the case that, so the metaphysics I give you here doesn't talk about probability or risk, but maybe that's a better metaphysics than the one that I have on my slides. So you could do that. You could take that judgment that you make about how when you omit to do something, the chance that they'll live lingers on, right? There's still a chance that they might live. And that explains why omissions are generally less bad than actions. That's consistent with my view, I think.
All right, Jerry.
So I just a very brief point for starters. The formula finish what you started, which you invoke in the sort of 3 versus 4 case.
Yeah.
That can't be invoked as a general principle, I don't think, because it's gonna, you don't want some of your other examples where the people finish what they started. So I just want to point that out as a matter of presentational.
Presentational, duly noted, duly noted. Yeah, you don't want to finish what you started. Well, actually, it could, I mean, you could have a moral principle like finish benefits that you started, but don't finish
fair
harms
enough,
that you started.
I wanted to get to finishing harms that you started case. The first case, the one where we balk at the idea of being allowed to drive over, or Jones being allowed to drive over the person in the way of his tank. So, and the reasoning there was that's a doing by action versus
Yes.
an allowing by an omission.
Versus a doing by omission. It's this case, right?
But it's also, see, this is what, it's also a doing by action. Isn't he on the hook for doing by action?
Okay,
also? And
good.
So aggregating and, sort of playing the reasons, balancing the reasons there. I'm thinking you should want to drive the person. You should want to steamroll.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's a non-Kantian intuition, and you have to
Well, no,
take
but
that
I
up.
mean, because he's on the hook, also, he's on the hook both for, if the T gets drunk, is he not on the hook for both a doing by action and doing by omission? Yeah, because he poisoned the tea, right? So
Yeah.
he killed the guy by action. His subsequent omission, it will stand or fall with his subsequent omission, whether he also killed someone by action.
Right.
So there's 2 factors in that case. Add them together. There's a doing by action for poisoning the tea, and doing by omission by letting him drink it. So that's 2 reasons against a single doing by action in the tank case.
Good.
So would they aggregate in such a way that
Good.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
But my answer is they do not.
Okay.
Okay. So here's time T1 and here's time T2. This is when he put the poison in the teapot, and he had this really strong reason not to do it at that time. But at T2, he can't. At T2, he can't go back in time and take the poison out of the teapot. So at T2, that's kind of like a sunk cost. And so there are only 2 reasons that are operative at this juncture when he has to make his decision. So when he makes his decision now, it's between not doing something to save
I see what you're saying.
blogs. And I know that you're worried about when at time T3, if he's going to look back. You're like, well, it would be really weird if, let's say he lets Smith drink the tea. Should we add these together then? I know we don't, you see why we don't add them together here, but now should we add them back here when we are figuring out his jail sentence?
Yeah.
And my answer to that is no. We don't add them together here. So the only place where these 2 reasons should be weighed is at T2, and you don't have to weigh them. You don't weigh them here because you have this reason, and you don't, add, these add.
Yeah.
You never add these. You only weigh this and this here, and you weigh this here, and here you just think about the doing by action, when you're thinking about sentencing him.
Oh, okay, so the doing by allowing washes.
It just goes away.
And the doing by action washes out at T2. So you never get them together. Right.
I'm sorry, let me make this even clearer. This doing by action is with respect to Bloggs, who's trapped in the road.
Yeah.
And this is the doing by action with respect to Smith, who's going to drink the tea.
Yeah.
And so the Smith doing by action reason isn't part of the decision procedure right here. Like, it's not relevant. It's not relevant to, because he's not deciding whether to go back in time and take the poison out of the tea. He's only deciding whether to run over Bloggs or not run over Bloggs. That's it.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Nathan?
Yeah, I was going to take you up on the opportunity to elaborate on the metaphysics.
Sure.
So elaborate, please.
Okay.
But I'll give you a few more. So I'm kind of sympathetic with Catherine about thinking that sometimes our actions lead to more possibilities and just kind of a richer metaphysics in regards to that. Also about whether someone's attentive or inattentive to the results of their action at the time that they make it. I think that's often morally important.
Yeah.
And so thoughts on that, which is part of the metaphysics too. And then finally, the part of this too, so a lot of your examples to me were acts or actions, right? And then you start talking about types of reasons. And I wondered, what do you see between acts and reasons here? Because on the one hand, it was easy for me to say, oh, it's the type of reason that the person has in mind while they act. But it seems like it's a little bit more complicated than that too. So just, I guess, those are some starting points about developing that.
Good. So I'm a big proponent of separating out the objective ought from the subjective ought. And I think that you should basically have a theory for each. And maybe the theories can be complementary. I don't know. But what I am doing in this talk is giving you an account of the objective ought, or the objective reasons that you have, regardless of whether you know them or not. And then there might be further questions about what you should do subjectively if you don't know what the objective reasons are. And there's all kinds, in the subjective ought versus objective ought literature, there's all kinds of cases where there's an objective answer about what you should do, but you don't have the evidence for what that is, and so then there's a different answer about what you should do, given the evidence that you have. And so I'm only talking about what you should do, all things, if you had all the evidence.
Yeah, okay. Good, that helps me situation.
Okay, good. You still want the metaphysics? Or how many more questions are there?
We've got quite a speakers list going. So
Okay, maybe we'll save it for the very end if we run out of questions. Okay.
Theo, thank you for the talk. I want to talk a little bit about metaphysics because that's what I'm interested in.
Okay.
So your distinction between the four different types. I want to focus on type 1 and type 2.
Okay.
Because to me, there doesn't seem to be a difference there. So, and this is why. I think there's a difference. So we take the example of rock, of X rolling the rock down, pushing the rock down. So as I understand it, type 2 would be they push the rock down, and then they could put a log there to stop it, but they don't.
Right. Yeah, I can back up to that.
Okay. So what my intuition is that the act of pushing the rock makes the act a endurance act. So it has diachronic valence through time. So it doesn't really matter when that action is taken. As long as that action is taken, every moment thereafter until the action ceases is enduring. So that type 1 just persists and endures throughout. So there's no point in which you can have a type 2 action because DA just goes through the whole time. So it either supersedes or it's just there the whole time. So I'm wondering if you think that there is something plausible about saying that actually no, it doesn't endure, that there's something else, like we can demarcate it somehow.
Yeah, I would go for the second option. So yeah, I definitely think that once he's pushed the boulder, which would be he's pushing it, and then at time t1.0001, it just takes a little second, the act is done. So I think the act only lasts that long. And so I don't think he's still acting at t2. I don't think he's acting. He could act, and that's why, but he omits to act, so that's why this is an omission. But you're right. If you thought that the action took a really long time, and he's acting like he continues to act this whole time, then my view just wouldn't even make any sense. I agree with you that there are some actions that take longer than other actions. So like getting your degree at college, like that might take 4 years. Or if you're getting a PhD, it might take 6 years or something. So that's a really long action. But I think that, it could take 12 years. And that's fine. That's OK. Or 15, or whatever you want. But pushing a boulder, I think it's done once you pull your hands back. I don't have a metaphysical theory of when acts are done. But that might be something I should think about. Thank you.
So I think I remember everyone's name for dinner last night, but white shirt is Jordan.
Yes.
Sweet.
Thank you very much. That was really interesting. Well, I guess my question concerns your discussion about the sort of gradability and weight of reasons. And I take it that since you think that these are objective reasons, whether we're not thinking about them, that you're kind of working within like a non-natural, moral, realistic framework, right? So our capacity to recognize these reasons from like type 1 to 4 as we engage in reflective equilibrium is it's not going to be like dependent upon our attitudes or sort of like their persuasive states at the moment. So like my question concerns like your conception of the metaphysics of these intuitions. Do you conceive them as like sui generis, kind of self-evident states that you are able to recognize in reflective equilibrium? Or do you see them as like dispositions to believe or beliefs? I think it's kind of a famous problem for the non-natural moral realist. But I think that your case in the way you sort of word this like gradability and weight of reasons, there's room for an answer, and I'm wondering what you would say about that problem.
Yeah, I keep using the word intuition, but to be more precise, like I really want to talk about reconciling particular judgments with general judgments. And so really what I'm talking about is like judgments that I make about each of the cases of the poison tea or whatever. And then I have judgments about the principles like type 1 reasons are stronger than type 2 reasons. Like that would be more a general principle that I'm judging to be true. So that's a general judgment, and then I've got a particular judgment about a particular case. And I take myself to be trying to get coherence between all these things. Now you might be asking, where do these particular judgments come from? Do they come from intuitions? And I think like in some cases they do, but I'm not going to say that I'm like a slave to intuitions. Because sometimes they come from intuitions, but sometimes particular judgments come from reflecting on the general principles, and then sometimes I resist my intuitions, right? And I go back and I revise my judgment about a particular case because I like the principle better, and I'm willing to like set aside the intuitive feeling that I get that it's wrong, if the rest of the picture is coherent enough. Yeah. Now you might also be asking like these particular intuitions that sometimes they serve as like prima facie evidence that I should make a particular judgment about a particular case. Where do those intuitions come from, and why do they have any prima facie justificatory force at all? Good. Yeah. So that's a good meta-ethical question for me. And I don't have an answer yet. I'm on the case. That's like, I'll try.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
It's not bad, but I'll have an answer on that one.
Okay.
Thanks. So I had a question about your trolley 1 example.
Sure.
There's the one person on each track.
Yeah.
What happens if we contextualize it a bit, and on the one track is my child, and on the other track is a doctor, and she's going to cure cancer? Are those morally salient reasons in our decision-making process, or for justifying one course of action or another, or is it like very Kantian and treat them as means to an end?
That's a good question. I think I would go Kantian on that one. Yeah, I mean, I think degree of harm to the individual matters. So if one person is a cancer patient who only has a month left to live, and then the other patient is like a young 20-year-old who has a big future ahead of them, that would give you more reason to turn the trolley onto the cancer patient, I guess, whatever track they're on, or let the trolley hit the cancer patient or whatever. Because in that case, I don't think death is as much as of a harm to that person as death would be in another case. That's a case where degree of harm changes the judgment about what you should do, like in accordance with the degree of harm principle. And I think the harm of death can change from case to case. Sometimes death is a greater harm, and sometimes it's a lesser harm. But in terms of like benefits to other people, like somebody's a doctor and they could find the cure for cancer, they're like anti-utilitarian. I don't think that's the kind of reason we should take into account in this case.
And what about like if it's your child?
Oh, it's your child. Oh, partiality, reasons of partiality.
Yeah.
It's your child. I haven't thought about that. I don't know. What do you think should be done? Should I just like add another principle to this set that has to do with like if it's your child?
I don't know. I mean, like I'm a utilitarian Kantian tendencies or sympathies and ethics of care sympathies, so it's a tricky problem for me too. I don't know what right answer would be. That's why I was hoping you had.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know what to do if it's your child. I have to think about that.
Fair enough. Thanks.
Yeah, so not to play the Kantian, I'm going to play the Kantian for a second.
Okay.
So I think that there's sort of like a potential critique from a Kantian or maybe a neo-Kantian, whatever, a Kantish angle. So like earlier, when you were talking about sort of the metaphysics, you said that you were taking yourself to be describing sort of like objective oughts, right?
That's right.
And I think that on a Kantian view, what you're talking about actually is subjective oughts. So, right, so take like the tank example, right? So I think like on a good Kantian reading of that case, and I mean that's already controversial because I have a particular view on it, but right, I think there it's a straight up moral dilemma, right? Like there is, and like in the moral dilemma, there's not like one's really the right thing to do. No, it's like it's actually a dilemma, right? Like running over the person is wrong, but also like you poison someone and not saving them is also wrong, right? So you really like actually put yourself into a pickle, a true moral pickle, right? And I think that on a Kantian view, right? Well, like all of the like moral reasons that you have to act are going to run you into trouble, and sort of on a philosophy of action perspective, like they can't initiate your action. Like literally they can't. So what is going to end up initiating your action instead is sort of the non-moral reasons that you have. Right, so like non-moral reasons are things like, a non-moral reason for action is like, oh, I enjoy drinking tea, so I'm gonna make myself sick, right? And that's not moral, that's just like, here's a reason for me to do this thing. And whatever, and I think that like, a Kantian can say like, listen, like whatever sort of values or, I guess like externally formed sort of non-moral practical reasoning that you typically engage in, right? And that's going to be dependent a lot on like your society and how you're brought up. Those are the things that are going to inform what you in fact do. And it seems like that's a way to explain kind of all of the varying intuitions that people can have. Whereas on your explanation, you're like, well, here's some intuitions, and then some people don't share them, and you kind of like don't seem to know, like, or it's unclear what to do with the people whose intuitions don't jive. Whereas like this kind of Kantian perspective would be like, no, we can account for all the intuitions. It's just, nobody hears, there's no moral thing to say. It's just a different kind of action that's happening.
So the view is one where there's no right answer in this case, right? Would the view also say that there's no right answer in large man, and there's no right answer in bystander, and just those two cases. There's no right answer in large man, so it's not true that you may push him off the footbridge, and it's also not true that you may not?
I think probably it is wrong to push enlargement, but in
Okay.
2, it's sort of up in the air.
It's up in the air whether
Or not up in the air. It's just like there's no right thing to do and there's no wrong thing to do.
there's no right thing to do and there's no wrong thing to do. So if you turned the trolley in number 2, it wouldn't be wrong.
I mean, it wouldn't be wrong morally, right? But I think that there are other reasons that we might condemn that person for doing so. And those are going to be non-moral reasons. Be like, oh, like, you know, like you're a sadist or something like that, right? But I think morally, sort of from a Kantian perspective, morally speaking, I think whatever.
So, but I guess, because all I'm saying on this slide is that it's not wrong to turn the trolley, and it sounds like you're agreeing with that. It's not wrong.
So it's not wrong, but also it is wrong. Like there's no, I mean,
Okay.
that's why it's a dilemma, right? It's a genuine dilemma. That both, like, you know, I guess in terms of like allowing a death or like causing a death, right? Both wrong, both bad.
Yeah, they are both bad.
Yeah.
But I mean, we're letting people die right now. Like right now, there are people dying. We could get out our computers and give money to the Schistosomiasis Foundation or the Deworm the World Foundation, and we could save their lives, and we're not doing it. Sorry, wait, that didn't have anything to do with anything. That was irrelevant, what I just said. Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Do you think that moral dilemmas arise, like even in the case I was talking, I forgot your name again. Even in the case I was talking to Nick about, where there's 1 million people on this track and there's one person on that track, is that also a moral dilemma?
Yeah. I mean, I think that like most people, right, are going to have an intuition that you save like 1 million people, right? And you know, Kant could say something like, and the reason for that is that, well, we tend to like care about other people and value their lives, right? But to like, in terms of like the moral law, right? Like the moral law is, you know, like that's not going to motivate, you know, the will in this case. So it's just sort of like a whatever, like we have like non-moral reasons for action in that case, and the non-moral reasons are like, oh, like I happen to value like just like numbers of life, and I have reasons for that, right? But that's not necessarily moral. But then I think like that's sort of where this accusation of like, well, what you're doing then is sort of the subjective law, right? Because then like you could have, you know, someone who has the 1% who has like a different intuition. It's like, well, like no, or like even maybe like the 1% is like your child, right? And you say like, no, listen, like I value that one person more than those 1 million people, and
Right.
you know.
So I like that you're using a theory to derive judgments about the case. And in your case, you're appealing to Kant's theory. I don't like Kant's theory. I'm not a Kantian. And I want to come up with a better theory. And this is part of that better theory. It's the aggregating reasons view. But the fact that you're willing to use Kant's theory to derive judgments makes me happy, because maybe that means I could sell other people later on in my life on my theory. And then they're going to start using it to like make judgments about stuff. And they'll be like, well, from an aggregating reasons view perspective, blah, 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 blah. And I do like that. And I feel like that's one of the things that an ethicist does. It's a service we provide. We can help people in cases where they're unsure. We can give them a theory that can help firm up like their judgments about what to do.
Yeah, I mean, I guess
I think we're going to
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. I want to pick up on a couple of questions that have already been asked. And
Sure.
I'm really curious about the methodological power of intuitions, and I think this is, I don't know your name. John. It might be the same question you asked, and if it is, you just go to the next person first. So I would get a chance to ask someone who is sympathetic to both sort of Kantian and utilitarian perspectives on this at all. And I'm not an ethicist, and so I'm not asking this, I'm asking this like teach me.
Okay.
So, I know it's standard practice in the field to use intuitions as explanations, and often to use them as evidence. But what is and then you talked a little bit about intuitions as data. And so I want to ask methodologically about why we should count intuitions as data in the first place, particularly when we look at a word like this one where the intuitions actually are pretty mixed. And if we are thinking about intuitions like data, and I think maybe we should think about the comparison not of philosophy to high energy physics, where we have individual experiments, but rather philosophy to something like epidemiology, or philosophy to ecology, where the context becomes very important, or the sort of overall XY kind of statistical analysis becomes very important. So that we be clear about whose intuitions are which cases.
Good. So you could, there are a lot of philosophers who don't think intuitions really should be given that much credence as like justification for various theories. That would be a view in metaethics. So there's disagreement about like how dispositive intuitions are. Let's see. If you're skeptical of the evidentiary value of intuitions for doing ethics, if you're skeptical about that, like you think that those intuitions don't actually point to a moral truth, you can simply take my view as a way to try to systematize my own judgments. And you're like, oh, this is a view of Molly's psychology. It's still interesting. Like, I have a weird brain. And maybe some of you agree with me. And then it would be a view not of just my psychology, but of everyone else's psychology. But that's cool, because psychologists try to come up with models of how people think and how cognition works. And so you can say, here's like a model of how my cognition works when I think about trolley cases. That's cool. But I still think that there might be a connection between moral intuitions and moral truth, because I believe that there are moral truths, objective moral truths. And I also think there is no way to get at them. There's no other way to get at them than to use intuitions. Like, what other access to them do we have? I don't know. So like, if you reject intuitions, I worry that you're just rejecting all of ethics. You're just like, well, there's no moral truths. Or if there are, we can't know them, and so let's just give up on the field. And I don't want to do that.
We've got about 7-8 minutes left and 3 people on the list, so hopefully there are quick questions we can get through all of them. Dylan, up first.
Okay, I'll try and make mine quick. I think it sort of dovetails with a lot of the other questions that were just asked. So I guess it seems to me like there's a sort of basic question about what the function of moral philosophy is. So Jan brought up the point about, should we just go and see a therapist, right? Like the sort of Wittgensteinian perspective, and be like, no, we need to just sort of let loose our grasp or our desire to hold on to these intuitions. So I mean, I guess I'm kind of unclear about what intuitions are, and I know this is obviously a big question, but I mean, it seems like, yeah, you could just take someone and say like, listen, you've been thinking about things in these terms, but I'll take you to see Dr. So-and-so, and then he'll help you think about things in these terms instead. Is what we're trying to do, I mean, are we trying to get something right, or are we trying to, because you mentioned the sort of idea of web of belief, and I'm a fan of Quine, so are we trying to sort of try and come up with a synoptic perspective on things that integrates as many of our disparate intuitions as possible, or are we comfortable with just saying like, well, I can take some laudanum, or I can go talk to a therapist and sort of have these intuitions, these problematic intuitions disappear. Do you have a take on that, I guess?
Good. So here are 2 lines that are the same length, right? And then we're going to do the Muller-Lyer illusion. I'm just adding these things to the end of them. And now when you look at it, it looks to you like this line is longer than that one. But you saw me when I first drew the 2 lines. You knew for a fact that they were the same length. And now your perception is off. I think intuitions are a bit like perceptions. And oftentimes our perceptions are good, reliable guides to the truth. And I think oftentimes ethical intuitions are good, reliable guides to the truth. But obviously sometimes our perceptions are wrong. And our perception in the case of this illusion is wrong. And so sometimes you need like a theory to help you correct for errors that you make when you have like bad intuitions. That's why you need intuitions and you need theory.
All right.
And I'm a therapist. Like, why would you go? I'm a philosophy professor, but that's a kind of therapy. Like, why would you go to a regular therapist when you could go to me to get help with your intuitions?
All right, ultimate question on our list. Anton?
Yeah, short question. I'm going to push you a bit on that. The action, how long it lasts, how long do I act? So, what you said when I pushed a boulder, and then my action stops. But I haven't killed anyone at T1.
Good.
And that's what I do. So, appropriate description of my action is that I killed, I don't know what the name, I killed someone. But at T1 I haven't done that. That happens at TM. So my action can't be done at that point, right?
I think that your action, strictly speaking, was pushing the boulder. It is true that you killed somebody in virtue of that action, but the action took place at a particular time. The killing did not take place contemporaneously with the action. In fact, the killing did not take place at any time at all. I don't think the action took place at a time. The killing does not have a time. I think the same thing is true of harming in general. There is no time of a harming. There's just the time of the thing that caused the harm, and then there's the time when somebody experiences the harm. But then there's no further question, or there's no further answer to the question, but when was the harm? There just isn't. It's kind of like saying, my talk lasted longer than your talk, because my talk was 45 minutes and your talk was 15 minutes. So we have the longer than relation. The longer than relation obtains between my talk and your talk. But if you say, when did that longer than relation obtain? There's no answer to that question. There's no time at which my talk was longer than your talk. My talk is related to your talk in a certain way, but that relationship doesn't have a time. And the same thing is like killing is causing death, and causation doesn't have a time either. There's the action, there's the upshot, but when did the causation occur? No answer.
And Lynn.
So, I'm terrible at remembering philosophers' names, but I remember this thought example, and it's about the doing versus allowing distinction. And basically, the thought experiment is that you're buried in a box, and if you move at all, then someone else will die.
Good.
It's very hard to not move for an hour, but by not moving for an hour, you can kill someone. And there's another one where if you move, you kill someone, and you don't move for an hour, you don't kill anyone, and that's also hard, right?
Yep.
And so it sort of, the idea that this is supposed to elicit is that there's something about the amount of effort we put into either omitting to do something or doing something, and that has some kind of relationship to our blameworthiness in a certain action, right? And so, and this might be applicable to these circumstances because, of course, pushing a fat man off a bridge is probably a lot harder to do than simply like pushing a button or pulling a lever. And so the amount of effort you have to put into killing him is a lot less than the effort you put into killing the one person on the tracks just by pulling the lever. Does that work into your view at all? Is that something you've considered in your framework?
Right. So I think the example you gave me comes from Jonathan Bennett, who was trying to give his own account of what the doing allowing distinction amounted to. And he gave this metaphysical account that it has to do with the ratio between the ways that you move and the ways you could have moved, and how that ratio connects up to the upshot or something like that. Like and like when you're not moving, I forget how it works exactly, but like the box. So what he does, what Jonathan Bennett does, is he gives this metaphysical account of what he takes to be the doing allowing distinction. And then he argues that once we have this account clear in our minds, we can see that it doesn't matter morally. So his conclusion is that the doing allowing distinction doesn't matter morally. And so his account of the metaphysics of doing and allowing is different from my account of metaphysics and doing and allowing. So his example of the box where you don't move doesn't quite cut against my view, but it does a little bit, because it definitely, cuts against the action-omission distinction, even though it doesn't cut against like the doing-allowing distinction. And so you might think like this box thing shows that there's no morally relevant difference between acting and omitting. You might think that. But then you have to weigh that judgment, that there's nothing morally relevant there, against the judgment that we might make in the other cases where we sometimes think that there might be a morally relevant difference. And
Yeah.
just figure out like which intuition you want to get rid of.
I do tend towards the utilitarian intuitions.
Okay.
So that's
Good.
All right, please join me in thanking Dr. Gardner one more time.